What happens that day? Why are Aqua and Kris so connected? Why was there a dark fountain a long time ago? Chapter 5 may not have the biggest reveals in terms of lore, but it's full of new questions. I think I have an idea that not only answers these questions, but solves mysteries going all the way back to Undertale. I'm the Mage of Light, and this is Old Souls Theory. Now, I think the first topic it makes sense to tackle here is the theory that Kris once had a Cyan soul. If you're already convinced of this theory and don't need to hear more evidence, feel free to skip to the next chapter of the video. If you don't believe in this theory, let me tell you that I used to be one of you. But now I think that not only is the evidence getting stronger and stronger over time, but that this theory does fit into the story. Now I know what many of you may be thinking. Kris is so similar to Frisk and Kara. Their name is almost an anagram of Frisk, they look just like Frisk, they use knives like Kara. All of these characters can be adopted by Toriel. However, I think there is a simple reason for this, and I have ways to address just about all of these points. First of all, listen to what Toby has to say about the Light World section of Deltarune Chapter 1.
The beginning of this game is all about the first impressions. I really wanted people think it was potentially Undertale. So I put so much effort into making Undertale looking world. That goes down to the menus and the characters.
If the Light World is meant to trick you into thinking it's just like Undertale or even a sequel to Undertale, it would make sense the protagonist seems exactly like the previous protagonists in surface-level ways when they're in the Light World. This explains why Toby would add so many similarities to the characters. Now let's look at the specific pieces of evidence. As for the similarities to Frisk, let's start with the anagram. It's missing the letter F, and almost everybody can accept that Ralse, a character of a complete anagram of another character's name, that being Azrael, is a parallel of that character rather than the same person. Additionally, why can't two humans look similar? They have the same color scheme and may have the same expression, arguably even the same body type, but other than that, they're not exactly alike. And keep in mind that Kara in Undertale dressed the same way and had the same silhouette as Frisk, so it's clear that Toby is willing to make humans look very similar for story reasons. Plus, look at the Mother series, a huge inspiration for Toby. Ninten and Ness, the protagonists of the first and second games, look basically identical, but are different people. Now let's look at the similarities to Kara. Same clothes, same family, and both like chocolate and knives. But that's where the similarities end. Toriel has always been willing to adopt human children, so being her child doesn't make them the same person, and of course the Dreamer's children would all wear those green and yellow shirts. Kara and Kris both are simply wearing Azrael's hand-me-downs. As for personal things, yes, Kris likes chocolate, but later in the Tenna quizzes, which are designed to point out the ways the player doesn't understand Kris, it's shown that chocolate is not their favorite food. It's not exactly surprising for somebody to like chocolate anyways. As for the knife, well, do you know what other human child, strangely enough, wielded a knife? The child with the Cyan soul in Undertale used a toy knife and a red ribbon. Kris, who is older than the child, uses a normal knife, and when they were young, they wore a red headband. The child seems to have died in the ruins, having spent time in the ruined city. This makes it likely they were adopted by Toriel, and since they represent patience, they stayed with her for a long time, much like how Kris lives as Toriel's child in Deltarune. The place of this fallen human's death is visited in the Undertale 10th anniversary stream. A strange, sad song plays in the background, which uses the exact same melody as the game over theme from Deltarune. A confusing choice that would make complete sense if you were seeing the place where Kris died, and therefore hearing the song that plays after Kris dies. Additionally, for evidence in Deltarune itself, there's firstly the fact that Kris has cyan skin in the Dark World, which is pointed out many times. No other character's skin changes that much in the Dark World. We have not seen another human in the Dark World, but we have seen many monsters in the Dark World. And they usually get slightly brighter colors, or occasionally small changes of color like Birdley's eyes. Never a total change in color. What was Toby showing by making Kris turn blue? It could be that their skin color changes to match their natural soul color. This is just like how each flower in Chapter 5 flowers in the Dark World posing as humans, have skin colors that match the souls they represent. But which one represents the patient's soul? Aqua. When you pay attention, Aqua is very similar to Kris. They have the same cyan skin, they both have red eyes that are normally hidden by shadows. They even have similar faces and hair, and of course they both use knives. Kris is also often seen equipping ribbons in the Dark World, like the Cyan Soul Human and Aqua do. The red ribbon Aqua wears on her head even has a heart-like shape, which could parallel the red soul inside Kris. Even the story itself points to the connection between Kris and Aqua. The two are connected more than any other flower is to any other character. They have a one-on-one battle in which Aqua mimics Kris and analyzes them, and Aqua's troublemaker personality is similar to Kris's own childhood. Now that we've established that Kris is almost certainly the cyan-souled human, a question is clear. What's the deal with the red soul? Why did Kris end up with a red soul instead of their original? It can't just be the player's soul. Why would the game assume the player has a red soul and not any other soul trait, when literally anybody could be playing the game? And how could the player's soul take damage from the game? It's also unlikely to be an artificial soul, too. We've never seen anything like that, and souls are supposed to be special and valuable. Why red specifically? This is Old Soul's theory. At the very end of Chapter 5, Asgore describes a terrible event that happened that day, which happened because of a dark world. Our beloved Vaguepost King doesn't give many details, and at first I was left stumped as to what happened. However, there is one thing that the cutscene points to. When Asgore references what happened, the screen flashes red and makes a sound like stabbing. This is the exact same sound and red imagery as what happened to Noelle when she was equipped with the Thorn Ring in Chapter 4's Weird Route. And later, the cracking shape seen in that moment is reference for the red lines connecting to Asgore. This makes it clear that what happened that day and what happens in the Chapter 4 Weird Route is the same thing. But what exactly did happen in the Chapter 4 Weird Route? I, like many others, believe Noelle was given a piece of the red soul. In every version of the cutscene, the entire screen goes black and a red dot ends up left where Noelle was positioned. The cutscene places extreme emphasis on this. We see in the beginning of Chapter 5 in the Weird Route that the red dot remains, and it has grown in size, even though it is not visible in the overworld at all. This dot is the exact same color as the red soul. The soul seems to have a connection with Noelle, especially on the Weird Route, hearing her thoughts more than other characters and eventually enabling Noelle to survive under the lake. I believe the soul formed a connection with Noelle on the Weird Route, and then created a small piece of itself that was implanted into Noelle as Kris touched her and put back the thorn. Therefore, the conclusion that must be reached by that day being shown the same way, down to the red color, is that a red soul implantation also occurred on that day, and that was the event that traumatized Asgore and likely Kris as well, who both witnessed it but were unable to stop it. Now, this theory can be made to work for many knight candidates, but personally I believe the knight is December. I don't want to waste time arguing for this when other people already have done it better. Just know that I will be discussing the theory from the perspective of Death's Knight from here on out. Anyways, I believe what happened that day is that Death was implanted by the Red Soul. However, the soul was not within Kris at that time. I think it was being used by Gaster. Many people believe, I included, that Gaster is a major villain in Deltarune, responsible for the Knight's existence. Asgore describes that black shards were found at Dark Worlds long ago, at a time, according to Ralsei, when the Knight shouldn't have existed. I think this may have been the black knife being wielded by Gaster, or somebody obeying him. Gaster was preparing to create the Knight. One or more Dark Worlds were created to lure or trap December, perhaps even to prepare her to be the Knight. Then, she was implanted with a piece from the Red Soul, and trapped in the darkness where, like the unused texts describe, she eventually became nothing more than a creature of memory. Then, when it was time for Gaster's prophecy to unfold, he released the Knight, now a formless being of darkness, powered by the Red Soul but with its mind and its will broken. This is why the Knight has holes in its hands, much like Gaster. It obeys him. The eye inside its torso could even be an eye that Gaster uses to watch its progress. This soul implantation could also explain why the Knight is so powerful, as magical beings with even one human soul are said to be insanely powerful in Undertale. And this would also explain why many of the Knight's attacks use the color red. It could even help justify how the Knight can exist in the light world. Knight's red soul might not yet be fully formed, but I believe Noelle will have a fully formed red soul by the end of the Weird Route, going down a similar path to her sister. One huge question remains: where did the original red soul come from? I believe the answer is simple: Undertale. Firstly, Toby Fox has said many times that Deltarune is meant for people who completed Undertale, which may or may not include the genocide route. Either way, this puts on the table that Deltarune will connect to Undertale's story, which it is already likely doing with Cyan's and Gaster's storylines. What happens at the end of the genocide route? Kara erases the world and says it's time to move on to the next one. Kara is not talking about a new save file here. They look down on you for wanting to get a new save file and demand that you sell your soul to them in exchange. The dead, demon version of Kara, who lost her original soul long ago, represents a part of the player that wishes to grow stronger to achieve absolute victory. Kara is a foil to Flowey, wishing to consume more and more worlds, and no matter how the genocide route is ended, they end up in control, and they take Kris' soul, which was yours, the one you controlled. What if, after leaving Undertale, they end up in Deltarune? In the files of Undertale, some strange lines known as the demon texts were found a while after the game came out. This message showed up to replace a message from Toby and went as follows. Greetings. You have made yourself completely clear. Understood. I, your humble servant, will follow you to the utmost. Sound like one side of a conversation with a demon swearing servitude to somebody. This demon speaks like Kara, and the only person called a demon in Undertale is Kara, so we can assume this is Kara. What if this conversation represents Kara after the game has been completed, after the world is gone, being offered a new one? Although they do not have the same influence they did in Undertale, some part of Kara may still exist for the soul in Deltarune. But who is the one offering this? Well, a lesser-known fact about the demon texts is that, for only one version of the game, 2 words could be found added to the demon texts. He is Gaster. Gaster, who is often associated with words like him and he, who writes in all caps, whose very name is a secret. From here it all falls into place. Gaster got a red soul, the soul the player had controlled, through Kara, in the aftermath of Undertale. He lured Des into the Dark World, planning to implant her using the soul. A young Kris witnessed this, but, perhaps out of fear, they could not bring themselves to help her until it was too late. Or perhaps they did something darker, but whatever the case, Kris couldn't help but feel like Des' fate was their fault. Asgore, the police chief and Kris' father, was brought to help. He saw everything. Both Kris and Asgore were filled with guilt at the tragedy they could not stop, and Des was imprisoned in the darkness until the time would come when the Black Knife could be passed on to her. Asgore found that nobody would believe his story, and became desperate to prove he was innocent, and neglected his own family until they left him. Kris wallowed in their guilt silently, not able to speak up for their father, until they may have even begun to hurt themselves, landing them in therapy. Then came the vessel. Gaster planned to use the red soul as the soul of the player's vessel, continuing the connection the player had in Undertale, and making it so that Gaster's antagonist and the player's protagonist or a perfect match. However, somehow, the sequence was interrupted, and Kris took on the Red Soul. Perhaps Carol was helping Gaster in the Light World in hopes of getting back her daughter, and roped Kris in, only for Kris to find a way to take the responsibility of the Red Soul, feeling they need to redeem himself. Perhaps a third party with an interest in Kris interfered. However it happened, Kris took the Red Soul instead of the vessel, and their Cyan soul was lost in the darkness. And who knows if it will be found again. Or if maybe somebody else has already found it. Now, as the weird route comes to a close, as a red soul develops inside Noelle, she becomes the next in a number of those who wield this red soul's power, spreading like a virus. First there was Frisk, then there was Kara. Then Gaster brought the soul to implant into Des, part of it still residing in the night. Then there was Kris, taking the place of the vessel, next to receive the soul. And all along, that original red soul was connected to you. You and the demon that comes when you call your name.